So today I will be speaking on the difference between straight rebellion and being deceived. I've done a video similar to this in the past using Adam and Eve. Today I'll still be using them, but I am bringing in something else, something new that God has taught me. So starting in Ezekiel 28:12 through 19, it tells us why Satan fell from heaven. It tells us that he was a beautiful anointed cherub that got proud in his own beauty. That's in verse 17. Then he was casted down to earth. And that shows up in Revelation 12, but also God speaks on it in verse 16 of Ezekiel 28. So now when he got casted down to earth, he comes to deceive the whole world. That's in Revelation 12 as well. And he deceives them into disobeying God the same way that he did, which is through pride of wanting to be as wise as God, to be like God, or to think we are better than God, that our ways and our thoughts are better than God's ways or thoughts. And this, you may not have that direct thought in your head, oh, God, my way's better than God's, I'm not going to listen to God. But anytime you choose not to obey God when you know what you're meant to do, because James 4:17 tells us that if a man knows what the right thing to do and they do not do it is sin. So if you know what you're meant to do and you choose your way rather than God's way, you are putting your knowledge, you are putting your own wisdom above God's. And that is what Satan did. God had given Satan this beauty when he was an angel of God, and yet he became proud within himself and started putting himself above God, forgetting where he got that wisdom. And as humans, that's what we do. We are placing our ways as better as his ways, when Psalms 18:30 tells us that God's ways are perfect. Okay, so there are two separate ways we disobey God, and both bear weight and consequences from the actions of disobedience, but one of them carries a greater responsibility and will carry a greater consequence for their actions. We come to seeing Satan in the garden. Satan knew, when Satan came into the garden, Satan knew who he was to target, to deceive. He knew to go to Eve. Because although Eve could quote God's commands perfectly, when the enemy came up and questioned, did God really say that? She was able to quote God's commands perfectly, but she had not directly heard the voice of God say that, because God commanded Adam not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil before Eve was even formed. It says in Genesis 2 that God gave Adam those instructions and then says, I need to provide a helpmate for Adam. And that's when he goes through the birds and the beasts and finally rests on creating Eve from Adam's rib. So because Eve got this information secondhand, that made it easier for the enemy to put a question of doubt in her mind and deceive her. And that's what happens to people today, is they get their information of God secondhand, where it's easy for Satan to come in, slip in, and put that doubt in there in order to lead them away from obeying God's commands. The problem came for her is that she still understood God's commands. She still knew what they were and still chose to disobey. When she made the choice to sin, she realized that that eating that fruit was going to make her wise. That's in Genesis 3:6. That is going to make her wise. And therefore, there was indication right there that Satan had come in and deceived her, because that is how he fell. He fell in being proud of his wisdom. And now, as humans, that is how Satan is causing us to fall. She was not seeking wisdom and according to God's will, but was wanting to set herself up to a standard that was not hers to have or hold. And that is exactly how humans are deceived by Satan today. So even though Eve ate from the fruit first and was deceived by Satan, the Bible places all the responsibility on Adam. And we see this in Romans 5:12-19 and 1 Corinthians 15:22, where it says, through one man sin entered the world, and due to one man's disobedience. Later, it tells us in 1 Timothy that Adam was not deceived. And that's in 1 Timothy 2:14. And that's because Adam had heard the direct voice and command of God. Part of the reason why Adam got the larger responsibility is we are told in Genesis 3 that after Eve ate from the apple, she turned and gave it to Adam, who was with her. Adam was there the entire time. Adam had heard the voice of God, knew that it was wrong, was there with her, and chose to eat with no objection. He did not stop it. And it goes on to tell us that it was after Adam ate the fruit that's when their eyes were opened and they realized that they were naked. Meaning that they did not fall until after Adam had eaten it. And that's because Adam was not deceived. Adam had not heard his information secondhand. He was in direct rebellion to God, knowing that he was in direct rebellion to God. Not only that, but they had been made one flesh. At the end of Genesis 2, we are told that they were made of one flesh. So when Eve ate it, only half of that one flesh agreed with Satan. When Adam ate it, it became a unified agreement with the enemy in their marriage. And this can go on to represent problems within marriages nowadays, that if one spouse is faithful to God, the whole marriage will not fall, right? But when both of them disagree with God and agree with the enemy, the marriage will fall because they both universally agreed as one flesh with the enemy. It shows the individual responsibility as well as the consequences of making decisions as one flesh. But back to Adam's responsibility. So because not only had Adam completed that agreement with the enemy at the time, but he was also in direct rebellion to God, he got the larger responsibility. He got the blame for falling because he was not deceived. He had not gotten his information secondhand. The issue with people today there are many people hearing the information of God, hearing about God secondhand, and the enemy is coming in to twist what they heard and lead them away from the truth, leading them into disobedience with God. But there are also people who have directly experienced God the way Adam did. They have directly experienced God telling them. They know what they're meant to do. They knew it was God telling them, and they are still choosing to go into rebellion. And we are seeing many people fall to that nowadays, that despite whether they're deceived or they experience God, they're choosing to disobey God and they are falling. One of the differences between Adam and Eve and now is that we actually hold more knowledge of God now than they did back then. They were in perfect paradise where all they knew was good, but we actually we have more knowledge coming from the Bible, coming from years of God speaking to us and inspiring humans to move in their direction and their calling. And we understand the enemy. They didn't know of the enemy back then. We have knowledge of the enemy. And we just need to grow in it and experience God to defeat him. So we have less excuse to disobey God. Although they had no excuse, absolutely none. We even have less because we know now that we are fighting against an evil demonic spirit trying to sway us. For those that are getting their information of God secondhand from people, pray for the wisdom to actually experience God, so that you're not as easily deceived by the enemy. The enemy comes in and tries to pretend to be an angel of light. God sends his angels to give us messages and to help direct us where he wants us to go. And Satan will come in and pretend to be one of those messengers in your mind, twisting God's truth in a way that seems right but is not. When you experience God for yourself and you hear the voice of God, or you see God's work telling you directly what you're meant to do, you are less likely to be deceived because you got the information firsthand. You know for a fact what God said, and Satan cannot come in and try to twist it, because you'll recognize the twist in it. And you have to ask God for an experience of him, rather than just getting all your information secondhand from another person. And that will come from reading the Bible for yourself and believing God when he speaks to you. Don't allow all that secondhand information to sway you from what God's trying to tell you, because many men are wrong in their interpretations of the Bible. And as for those who have heard the direct voice of God and have experienced God, remain faithful in what he has had you do. My personal experience is, as my life has gotten busier, as things have gotten more stressful, my video content has gone down. And I have had difficulty making it, but I know this is something that God has told me to do. There's like 3 solid things that God expects me to do no matter what, and this is one of them. And I promise you, the enemy came into my mind and tried to tell me, well, this is a new season of your life. You are not to make videos anymore. You're too busy. And I said, God, there's no way, because this is the way that God is having me spread the gospel, and it's not too much for me. I was just struggling with gaining insight on what to do on a video, because I don't just go and make it in my own knowledge. I would fail terribly if I did that. I wait upon the Lord to tell me what content I should put in my video. And I hadn't been hearing of anything. So I asked God for wisdom. I was like, I need wisdom on what to put in my video. And Satan's still on the other side of my mind saying that I wasn't to do it. But I asked God for wisdom, and he gave it to me. I had a direct command from God, and I knew I was not easily swayed, because I didn't get my information from another man. Sometimes people will have others come in that are legitimately from God and give understanding, but God had already spoken that to the person first, and it confirms what God said to the person directly. Sometimes people come in and they give you a whole lot of direction and guidance that God never spoke, and that's where, if they rely on that, they go wrong. But when you know it's God's direct command, even if he has to confirm it through another person for you, remain faithful in it, no matter what comes to mind, no matter what the circumstances look like. It may look like you're not able to do it anymore. Then you ask God, you place this on me, give me wisdom on how to do it and to push through it. And he will. He will honor that, but you have to defeat the enemy.